Live from San Diego, it's Zoom at 8. Good evening, everybody. My name is Julianne Peterson, and I welcome you every Tuesday night to join us for Zoom at 8. We've been doing this for 5 years. You guys have been showing up, and we've been introducing you to some of the greatest names, the greatest industry experts that can increase your knowledge, increase your partnerships, really network really well with some of these experts. So tonight is going to be nothing short of amazing. We've got Sandhya is in the house, and we're going to be talking about asset management. But before we get there, if you're looking at a deal, which there are some deals out there, but there's not a lot of equity, I would love to have the opportunity to provide some feedback on the loan, because the lender, I'm a lender, we are your biggest partner. So you want to choose somebody that you know, like, and trust, who's been doing this for a long time. We've closed 7,000 loans. It's a lot. And we've got great relationships with brokers, with lenders, with lots and lots of people. So if you are considering, before you put in an LOI, let me take a look at it. It takes me 48 hours to pass off some information to you. I just need your T12, your rent roll, the OM, your offering memorandum, and your underwriting. And we'll put it through with our lenders to give you exactly what the lender's going to bring in terms of proceeds to your transaction. So at that point, if it's like 50%, you have to make a decision. Do I want to pay $22 million for that? Or would I be better serving my investors at $20 million? And that's why you want to do it, come to a lender before you put in an LOI and not overpay for these assets. Crazy time out there. So we are all trying to find capital. It's not easy. You'll hear, oh, there's lots of capital on the sidelines. Are they going to be on your deal? That's why you come here, Zoom at 8. We can help you network with real life investors. A lot of these people are looking for deals. So this is the beginning of your new life, understanding about asset management. Because listen, I don't think we have done a very good job in this industry to prepare people in how to manage these deals, managing the manager, managing the maintenance requests, managing the lease audits, managing how much to charge on rents. And so tonight I am just so pleased to bring a specialist who's been working in this industry for quite some time. Sandhya Seshadri is a specialist. She is an industry expert. She has been creating wealth through building communities. She's an apartment syndicator, an underwriter, a hands-on asset manager. She lives in Dallas. She buys in Dallas. She's an immigrant. She has a mindset of an immigrant, of extreme gratitude to this country and especially the Lone Star State, Texas. She is passionate about serving her residents, and you guys will be blown away by what she does for her residents, and building wealth for her investors by creating neighborly communities and impacting lives, both on the neighbor side, as on the leasing side, as well as her investors. So she's created the ACE operators over the past year. She helps operators successfully asset manage their properties. So it is a pleasure to introduce to you. I think this is her third time here at Zoom at 8. I can't get enough of her information, and you won't either. Sandhya, welcome again to Zoom at 8. How are you tonight?
Doing great, Julie. It's such an honor to be here. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I started investing in multifamily about 5 years ago, so definitely nowhere close to the experience of some others in the industry. But what happened to me was COVID happened right after I got my first deal. So my partners couldn't travel, and I ended up learning from every trip to the property and every vendor. And so I learned it from the people on the job, like my local property manager, every, like the, vendors who came to do the interiors, the exteriors, everything, because I had no prior construction background. I knew nothing about real estate. I had not even done a single family rental. So I came from basically zero and just was this open sponge absorbing everything. Because once I sent my kiddo to school, I had this time. And when my experienced partners, who were the true brains of that first deal, couldn't travel, they would direct me and I would end up doing a lot of it and learning that way. And then the other thing that happened was I acquired deals later in the toughest market, almost the top of the market. So if you did not manage your assets by now, like they'd be foreclosed kind of state, right? So I just had to learn. It's like I got thrown into the rough waters and I either had to sink or swim. So I asked everybody I know. And so all of my knowledge, and I'm still continuously learning, and there's a lot of experts in this field, but I never stopped learning. I never stopped taking advice from others and try it out and discuss it because it's a collaborative effort. So my team, which is my on-site, are sometimes the best to give me ideas, but some other times it's a lender like Julie or someone giving me the vision that I need to execute. So it's a combination of both, and I'm still learning. I'm still struggling. I have some deals that are doing great. I have some deals that are struggling. So it's everything in between, and happy to share my experience here with the audience.
Well, again, I think
Mm.
that, while you are only in this only, I mean, 5 years is a lot, right? But what I want to really introduce people who are in the room, a lot of us decide, okay, what do I bring to this team that I'm trying to create? Right? Should I be an asset manager? Well, what is an asset manager? Should I be an underwriter? Should I be a capital raiser? So when you decided you were going to asset manage this, at least that's what you thought, I want to share with everybody, what was your background? I know that you were an immigrant child who came here at 18 to go to college with what, $2? I think it was some of your luggage, a suitcase, and a couple dollars. And
Yeah.
but what you did is you went to college, you became an engineer, and that was the experience that I think I would love for you to kind of dig in and walk us through how you look at deals because based on what you were doing as an engineer. I think it's fascinating.
Well, the biggest thing is my food budget was $8 a week. My parents earned 60 US dollars a month. There's no question of coming here to the US without a scholarship. So that's how I came here. And so every dollar actually matters to me. And so people ask me why I don't drive fancy cars and have, designer purses and all of that, because I really think I can put my dollars elsewhere. And every once in a while I splurge in travels like the way Sean does, but I do all of my flights in coach and I try to find bargain deals all the time. So my only real splurge is my travels. Everywhere else, it's just the bargain in me. So when I look at deals, I always look at it from the perspective of payback period and ROI for every dollar I spend. So I question why I should spend $20,000 on an interior to get a $300 or $400 rent bump if I can spend $3,000 instead and get a $75 rent bump or maybe $100 rent bump. So that's a big piece for me. That's one of the things that I apply. Another one is just the view of a resident. I used to live in a C-class apartment myself. And what I missed, especially as an immigrant, right? I didn't know a lot of people here, was the community feel. So I always like doing community activities that sort of at least makes you aware. Here, Memorial Day weekend is coming up. We're going to have a pool party at our property. Okay. And, summer kickoff is going to happen. We're going to have, a back to school bash of some kind. We always have national night out because I think it's important for you to know your local police officers. We had an Easter egg hunt. We will have something around Thanksgiving. One time we did the free Thanksgiving turkeys. Another time we did pies, etc. Christmas, Santa comes to our property. So there's always something going on, and it's not something frightfully expensive. Like National Night Out practically costs you nothing unless you want to spend the money on some giveaways, in which case you could still request a nice vendor. Like if JT did your insurance for you, I bet he'd sponsor a $100 event at your property, right? You could always ask him that. So you can always ask vendors who's getting your landscape contract, right? Who's getting your, various contracts, or who is doing all your interiors, etc. There's ways to afford these things. So I look at it as if I build a community, then I'm building retention, then people stay longer at my property. They don't leave, and I don't have to have a big turn cost. So, we can definitely discuss the math of all of that, but it makes sense if your incentive structure for your on-site is also based on renewals and retention rather than so much on new lease. Like imagine yourself, you've been, let's say, a Verizon customer for a while, but your friend now switches to Verizon and gets a better deal than you. That doesn't feel right. So I kind of say, let's keep our existing customers. Let's see what we can do to improve our retention when it makes sense, especially the good, loyal, paying customers who've been there a while. So a lot of these philosophies coming here as an immigrant plays into how I run my apartments now. And so that's why I tell people, when I arrived here, I lived in a C-class apartment in an area called the Village Apartments in Dallas, not far from downtown Dallas. And, now I go and buy them.
That's so fantastic. So talk to us a little bit about your when you worked for Texas Instruments, right? You were a project manager, right? And you were overseeing all of the different departments.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not any different, let's say, than managing a property like you do on all of them that you own. What I thought was really interesting is the critical path that you would establish. And maybe you can talk to everybody about, some of the things that you put in place just based on your experience as an engineer.
So I have an engineering degree, and then my company was kind enough to pay for me to get a business degree part-time in the evening. So I went to a local college, for the same college actually, where I got my double E as well, for my evenings and weekends to get an MBA, so I could understand how salespeople, marketing people find these projects. How do they come up with these business plans and tell us engineers what to do? So I wanted a combination of both so that I could move up the ranks a little bit faster. So my last role at TI was what they call the program director. So I supervised other project managers at different sites, and Charles can definitely relate to this. But we were producing, my most recent job before I quit was wireless products, and before that was automotive products, etc. But essentially, it's still the same. Our assembly, which is the manufacturing of these chips, was done in Taiwan. The wafers, the silicon chips, that was actually, the sand to silicon wafer, you can watch some videos, was actually made here locally in the Dallas area. So if you're in the Richardson area, if you're in the Dallas or Sherman areas, you'll actually see these semiconductor production manufacturing facilities. That's where the wafers were made. But the design brings, right? Our Bluetooth team was actually in Israel at that time. Since then, TI Israel no longer exists, but the head of TI Israel is actually the CEO of TI today. Interesting fact. So he's the one I used to work with. And then there's the Bluetooth is in Israel. FM and GPS was sort of done in India. Some of it was also done in Dallas, and all of the integration happened in Dallas. But your sales and marketing was in San Jose because you went after the Silicon Valley customers. You wanted the end users to be those, the Apples and the other, electronic manufacturers of the world that were all at that time in the Silicon Valley area. So it was really important that all the team members talk to each other, because you might have an analog side and a digital side. You also have these different technologies involved. You need to make sure all these designs are made in the same node and the same technology so that the circuits can talk to each other as you integrate these different features into one little chip. So look at your phone, right? All of us have this iPhone. Inside it, there are so many little chips if you take it apart that make this. So why does it matter? As a program director or project manager, one of the things you have to do is follow what's called a critical path. If anything in that critical path changes, that means the entire project is delayed in terms of schedule. And sometimes today, the critical path is a certain way, but if a couple of other things get delayed elsewhere, they influence, and then those become the critical path instead. So something that you might say, I'll just postpone it forever, and then suddenly it becomes the highest stressful factor. How is that related to what we do here in asset management? Well, you need the high level view. You need to know what's the big picture, what's the critical path, So you keep that vision. And I get that vision from two sources. One of them is my lender, like Julie, who will tell me these are your targets, especially if you're looking at an exit or if you're looking at a refinance or in general what you have to meet, because remember, the lender is your biggest owner of the property and therefore your biggest boss. So they give you that direction as to what your numbers need to be. Similarly, my listing broker, if I'm anywhere looking at selling a property in the next 6 months to a year, they also give me direction. So in both sides, they come and look at it. So Julie could look at it from the lens of the lender for a potential new buyer and say, you need to improve this, this, this. Why don't you leave this as an opportunity is what the broker will tell me. Update a few interiors, show me this, but then change this. So that's your steering. That's your critical path is given to you by external inputs from those two. But then your tactical steps of executing it translates to, okay, I need 100 more per door here, or I need $50 more per door, etc. So you take those steering into from your critical path, which I call the helicopter view of your property, and you translate that into what is happening at the street level. How do I remove these potholes so that my ride goes smoothly all the way from start to finish? And so I'm here to remove bottlenecks for property management, but also to stay out of their way so they execute this plan. So if I want to increase my overall, let's say, collections by $10,000 and I have 100 doors, we're talking $100 per door. How can we get there? Maybe I'm already at the top of the market in my studio units, but maybe there's room for those 2 bedrooms that are highly sought after. So whatever those tactical tips become, that's what you discuss with your property management. They come up with some of those ideas for you so that together as a team you can execute. So that's where the project management, program management comes into play, where you can do the high level things and you can deep dive when necessary to be an asset manager, because we are juggling different priorities. So we have our 3 bosses, which is number 1, our lender. We do whatever the lender tells us. There's absolutely no negotiating that. We do whatever the city tells us because that's code compliance. They can basically put us out of business if we don't do what they say. And then insurance, you have to be compliant. So whatever JT tells you, I'm sorry, but those balconies aren't tall enough. Those railings are too wide. A kiddo could slip through that. That's a liability. Fix those stairs, whatever that is. Fix that parking lot. You got to go do all of that. So those are your 3 bosses. And then your 2 stakeholders are your investors, your passive investors without whom you couldn't do a large syndication. And then your residents are your customers. So make sure whatever amenity you add, like I want to put a pickleball court. Okay, does your C-class resident in this particular location care about it? Or would they rather just have, I don't know, better parking or maybe a soccer field or whatever else? So really get to know who's your ideal customer and what they need, because residents are your customers. And the more amenities you add that they appreciate, the more you'll get, your retention, your resident referrals, your positive Google reviews, etc. So that's the 5 pieces. I like to show it as a hand. So those are the 5 things that you juggle. And at the heart of the POM is you, your asset manager, and your property management team as a team combined to execute that strategy.
Fantastic. Wow, so much information there. So in these difficult times where we're struggling, I'm not saying we can't get rents up, but the rent growth has slowed in many markets. We're putting an enormous amount of pressure on your property manager. I mean, you might not be, but a lot of these new investors are putting a lot of pressure. Let's call them asset managers, people that are, filling this position as asset managers. I know you have strategies to talking to property managers, because I think that there's a lot when you go into these deals. These property managers have had relationships with other syndicators who had unrealistic expectations on the time frame that they could of those expectations. So can you give us several ideas of how you speak to a property manager How do you incentivize a property manager? How do we increase the NOI, right? If you're coming to me as the lender and saying, hey, how do I get out of this? How do I refinance it? And I've told you we need to raise the NOI to a certain amount. How do we incentivize these guys? What are you doing? And maybe some tips for people that you've been successful with.
So the number one thing I would say is for you as a general partner or you as the asset manager, as well as, shall we say, them as the property management company, each of you independently in parallel do your own competitive or comparative shopping. I like to drive my competition as I visit my properties. If I'm going to go to my property anyway, I'm going to try to visit some of the neighboring properties in person. What that helps me get a feel for is the first thing, a basic curb appeal, a basic feel for what are they offering in amenities that my subject property does or does not. So how do I differentiate? What makes my property stand out? If I'm a renter and I'm driving that area and I need to rent a property, why do I pick subject property over competitor A, B, and C? So really know the strengths and weaknesses as much as possible among all of them. That's your number one. Next, if you can secret shop them, phone shop them, or in person shop them, really know what the rents are so that you know for your subject property, are my studios at the top of the market? Are my two bedrooms at the top of the market? And within that, is my square footage reasonable to really be a fair comparison? It needs to be apples to apples. If I'm a C class, I can't compare myself to a B plus or an A minus that was built in the 90s if I was built in the 70s, right? My subject property. So really look at what's a fair comp, compare the amenities, the exteriors, but also the size of the floor plans, the walkability as much as possible of the floor plans, as well as then the actual rents, and put it all into a nice little spreadsheet. We have a comp spreadsheet that a lot of us use, like Charles and others use. And what we do is we compare by unit type. So subject property versus property A, B, and C. What's my studio, one bedroom, two bedroom, and three bedroom rents? How do I compare per square foot? And then we add comments, which is if I walk into the, let's say, a newer property or a nicer updated property's two bedroom, do I get the same feel? Is it more open? Is it more inviting and feel spacious? Even if the square footage is not exactly the same, right? There's the visual appeal. So once you do a competitive study, you have that data. And then you tell your PM to do the same so you can compare if your studies are both giving you the same info, because that's different from what CoStar might be having. Now you have data. Now you go and say, okay, I need a plan. My lender has just told me somehow I need to find an extra $5,000 for my NOI. Let's look at our leases expiring in the next 90 days. Which ones are move outs where we have the opportunity to bump the rents? And where are other sources of income that I can bump? These guys are charging, $200 pet in a fee. It's not a deposit, it's a fee, so they get to keep it. And then they're charging, $30 per pet or $50 per pet. And I'm only charging $10. And I'm only charging a pet deposit that they get to take back when you, right? So that's a little detail. Well, there you go. There you got $200. Every new lease, every new pet. How often do you walk your unit? Every time pest control comes, every time you make an excuse to go change filters, every time there's a work order done, one of the extra things your maintenance should be noting automatically is, are they hoarders? Am I able to even use my keys to get in there? And are there any pets? They should come back and tell you that right away, because then you all know you've discovered all the extra little pets that were perhaps not declared. So that's all easy, free money for you. So I would start with all those easy things. Next is parking. If others in the area are charging for parking, start offering it as free for the first month on new leases and on renewals and seeing how people like it, if there's enough interest. If you're already doing the charges for parking, well, on new leases, maybe see if you can bump it up by $5 and see what happens. Every one of those little things is somewhat free money, but parking is an easy one because you go get a stencil from Home Depot and you spray paint it. That's it. You're done. It's called reserved. You just have to pick that. That's it. right? Reserved is easy. Now, covered requires a permit. You may have to build something that may take longer. Reserved is as easy as, okay, give me an hour. I'm going to be back from Home Depot, right? Kind of thing. And I've got my reserved parking. So I would look for those two. But rent is the ultimate bread, butter, meat of your property. So where are you in rents? What do your best residents say as the greatest thing about your property? And what are their complaints? So address that, get to the core of where your property is and how you can increase it, and then discuss it with your team. What is your property manager saying? What's their biggest headache? What do they have trouble leasing? So spend more money on the ones that need a little extra oomph to be leased out. Or my studios are always empty. I have no trouble leasing my 2 bedrooms. Well, then the studio might have to be that model unit. It might have to be that mini model. It might have to be the one that gets an extra month of free parking or something else that doesn't affect your rent, because your lender, like Julie's going to tell you, I need that net rental income of $180,000 a month. Don't reduce that number. Don't offer a concession there. Go put it somewhere else, right? So that direction from a Julie is going to tell you how you can go and implement that so that the resident is happy, so your occupancy is high, and your on-site is on board with that plan. So the next piece is, how do you incentivize on-site? Now that you've included them in their ideas and decision making, they feel more like you're not ordering them to do something, but they are part of the solution. So that's the first step. Once you've done that, what is an incentive structure? Well, I like to incentivize them on renewals. So I want a 60% renewal rate because I don't have to spend the money on turn costs. So then that incentive has to go to maintenance also. So the entire team, right? How many ever you have in maintenance taking care of work orders, as well as your, office staff, you might have to come up with an incentive structure that says it's not just work order cycle time, but it's been verified by somebody else who's not part of this incentive structure. Because otherwise, anything can be called a work order. And look, I did this many work orders within the 2 days. Okay. Same thing with new leases. If really occupancy is a challenge, you need to get new leases. If you just say every new lease gets $100, they're going to put anybody they want on the store of. There's a risk of that. So did they pass all the screening? Do you use Snap or some other software for your screening? Were they approved by the regional? Did they meet the income qualification criteria? Did you actually personally call the employer? Because employment and fraudulent pay stub is on the rise. So what you will get is this website. Like all I have to do is go to Facebook or something and search for fraud pay stubs. And there's a ton of people who get it for me for about $50. And they have a legit website, they have a legit phone number they will answer, etc. So you really have to screen that. So when we incentivize on-site for anything related to leases, we make sure that it's paid out over a 3-month period so that we get 3 months of rent from this new tenant before we just give away some leasing special, as an example. But getting on-site on board on your plan is very important. We also tell them, hey, my CapEx expenses are this much. Why is a unit turn or a unit upgrade of this level costing this much? I want you to competitive shop. And if you, for every, I don't know, $1,000 that you're able to reduce that cost, I'm going to give you an incentive, whether that's 5%, 10%, something back. But you have to look at the past 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, what has happened. Because otherwise, they'll just give you an inflated bid and tell you that, okay, I'm going to reduce your cost, right? So you got to have your checks and balances. Because these people, remember, are paying $50,000, $60,000 a year in salary. So every $100 actually matters quite a bit to them. And so you want to be fair and you want to incentivize them, but at the same time, you don't want to be, getting ridiculous with those bonuses and stuff. So what is the most important thing you've got to address? That's where I would start.
What I hear you saying is you are almost as involved in what they do. You're keeping them following the direction that you've given them. I think a lot of times it's the property manager who's telling you what they're going to do. And what I hear from you is you're more collaborative and saying, this is what we need to do. You have enough experience. And that's what I want everybody to understand. You are driving the decisions. Remember, you're figuring out the data that is coming and what is happening at this property, and you're getting them to buy into what you need them to do instead of them telling you what they're going to do. I found
So
it really interesting, Sandhya, that you were looking at some appliances. Tell us the appliance story that you thought maybe that they were putting in new appliances. Kind of walk us through that. How you kind of changed the way they were going to install new appliances.
we told him that we wanted to cut back on the budget. And so this guy came up with this idea that he's going to put used appliances. And he just kind of got it approved by one of my partners and forgot to tell me. So I'm looking at work orders going, why am I actually having so many complaints that some appliance isn't working and I'm constantly having to replace appliances? And I discovered when I look back at the invoices that they had paid a reasonable price for these used appliances. And for maybe at the most 50 to 100 bucks more, and in some cases even less, I can get brand new ones from Home Depot, click, 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 order and deliver to the property in stainless steel too, for that price or a better price in some cases. So it was ridiculous. So I had to stop that immediately. But what I'm saying is when you just let them go, but not going into the, detailed level of scrutinizing it, sometimes they run amok. I also have a couple of properties where I barely have a 10-minute call, and the calls are only every other week because they're on cruise control. We've been together long enough to where we understand each other. I don't have to go to this level of scrutiny. Occasionally, I'll be like, what help do you need? Why are the studios not getting rented? And that's about it. If my vacant days is more than 10 days, I'm like, what's going on? Why aren't you leasing these? But we have a couple of properties completely on what I call cruise control that I hardly have to do much other than I go and make sure the employees know they're appreciated. So we have a maintenance appreciation day. For Mother's Day, we handed out flowers. I do a Chick-fil-A lunch at least once every other month, if not more frequently, or I know their favorite Sonic drinks and I'll buy them if I'm out in the afternoon. Just little gestures like that to say, hey, I know you and I'm thinking about you and I'm happen to be in the area, so I stop by kind of thing. But I also do a lot of surprise visits. I also have my phone with an app in which I have cameras and I can look at the leasing office of any unit at any time. I also have most cameras working all around the property. And that's important to me to know, okay, did you really show up on Saturday like you said you would? Because I don't have to go each time to in person. But the point being, checks and balances when needed if your relationship is new. If you have new hire, it's a new PM, you haven't worked with them for a while, you may have to do a little more of that trust but verify, right? And once you get used to it and all the bills seem to be about the same amount for a typical rehab, then you don't have to worry about it. But here's something I do that I haven't heard anyone else do with a third party is once a year, just like we do a full due diligence walk of our properties when we acquire them, I get Brian Amos with Omni Assessments, which is an independent third party company that I pay to walk every unit and give me a full due diligence report on an iPad, all electronic, like a matrix. So I know exactly what happened with unit C116 2 years ago when I bought it. 12 months later, what condition is it? And today, what condition is it? When did it have a white appliance or black appliance or stainless steel? How is the flooring? How is the resurfacing, etc.? And so one of my buddies, Nick Espinette, that some of you might know, he's in my mastermind, Ace Operators. He said just that one trick of doing an annual due diligence walk professionally done by a due diligence company to give you a matrix of those details has helped him save easily increases property values by over $1 million. So that's why we have those Millionaire Club awards at our event, is people who've increased their property values by over $1 million just implementing a couple of the ideas that we toss around in our meetings. So don't miss the opportunity. Don't think of it as why should I spend 3 or 4,000. The fun is when you have a neutral party like a Brian Amos giving you this report. It's not me pointing fingers at PM or them pointing fingers at me saying, you're such a cheap owner, you didn't spend that money, or you didn't check that when you looked at those units. It's all from Brian Amos. It's from a neutral party. They're saying, hey, guess what? In this unit, there's actually a hole in the ceiling. Were you aware of that? Because residents don't report these things. That's the problem. The news media is going to call you a slumlord, but if the resident didn't report it, when are you going to know? That's why I'm telling you those pest control, those changing filters, those work orders are your opportunities to check those things. so that you're not called a slumlord. There's not some leak that's now turned into a mold problem that you weren't aware of. So at least once a year, do an annual walk. I like to ask my PM, when was the last time you walked inside unit C116, right? What did you see inside it? Why are we having such a huge 20K rehab to be done? Was that person a hoarder and you never entered the unit? What happened? Right? You need to know that. So you need to at least periodically go in and walk all these units.
So one of the things that I heard you say, and we're going to touch a little bit on ACE operators, your event that you just had, and maybe people that are interested in learning more about being asset managers. You talked about, and I know you talked about it earlier today, the pets, understanding what pets are on site. Another creative way to find out what pets are on site is a pet parade,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. We have a
What
pet
a great
contest usually.
and creative way. So, can you tell us maybe a little bit of success that you were able to find out and how you dealt with the tenant and how that went once you figured out that they had a pet on site?
So we highly promote and publicize a pet contest at least once every 6 months at our properties. And we give away a lot of these PetSmart gift cards or a gift basket, maybe one for a dog, one for a cat. And people submit their photos or, of their dressed up pets or cute pets, etc. And then it's by unit number. So now we're like, oh, we didn't know you have a second pet. Oh, you're not really allowed to have four pets in your unit. You're supposed to only max is two, or I don't think you were allowed to have that breed of pet, etc. So for the small investment of anywhere from $50 to $100 every 6 months, you're going to get so much more in revenue and fees and everything. It's one of the best ROI ideas that I do is
I
having a
just
pet
love that
contest.
idea. It's fantastic.
Easy one.
Um, Now we are going into relationships in this business. We
Mm-hmm.
have partnerships. Um, we want to know who we're doing business with.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's, your partner in the deal or partners as in property management. But one of the things that you had talked about was putting together a memo of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that this was a great piece that I don't think a lot of investors or groups are talking about. So, can you share that with the audience? What are your recommendations for putting together a memo of understanding, what that looks like, what it feels like, the input, so everybody's kind of on the same page?
Well, partnership is a business marriage. You want to take the time to date well, and you really want to know what each person's sort of pet peeves are. Who's going to take the trash out versus, who's going to be changing the diapers at 2 a.m. and everything else in between. So, in terms of asset management, there's a whole bunch of duties, but also in the initial phase, right? When you want to be making offers, who's going to do the comp shopping? Who's going to do who's going to be the main lender liaison? Because that's a whole set of, ball of wax, if you want to call it that. And the same way with legal, right? And who's really good? Like one of my partners is a former insurance guy. So obviously he's the one looking into the whole liabilities and what we need for coverage and all that, because I'm never going to read the fine print the way he can. So you want to kind of identify the strengths of your partners and figure out what role they will do before closing, but especially after closing, which is, the marriage, the rest of your life, the next 5 years at a minimum. And you want to get that in writing so that there's no surprises. One of the difficult questions that should be asked that I know I didn't ask in my initial deals, but I do now is, if the deal does badly, how much liquidity are you going to reserve for this deal? Not in general in life. You might have $1 million, right? They may be going to your other 15 deals. So this deal that you and I are doing together, how much are you going to have in liquidity available to put into this deal? Are we going to agree that, let's say the deal is in distress and we've got to put some money in? It's going to be along the lines of the GP splits. I recommend that. So if you're going to get the lion's share of the GP split, you're going to get the lion's share of the acquisition fee, whatever else. I'd like you to be the one to put the lion's share of the money to save the deal too. It works both ways. It's not an equal now. No, you're getting, 2/3 share or whatever it is. Well, then you put in 2/3 of the money that's needed. It's all of it. Who's going to be the guarantors? And Therefore, as guarantors, they've basically signed with the lender that they're the ones with the 20 million worth, and here I am with barely an accredited worth, right? So you're the one who's going to be coming in with the money. So put that in writing. Yeah, I'll be the one to save my money. What about the roles? Okay. I have a painful thing going on. This is the lead asset manager. Well, will you all support me if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm exhausted, if I need more help because we're literally having a building on fire or whatever else? Who will step in? Who's going to be number two, number three, etc.? What if, I get hit by a bus? Who's going to cover for me? What if all the bank documents and the bank account is only under one person's name? Is that okay? No, it's not okay. So let's make sure all of us have view access of the CapEx account and the operating account. Let's make sure all of us have login access to that resident system. Even if you're never going to log in, let's make sure we all have it. And that way we can step in. So think of the contingency plan, because now you're talking about other people's money. And it's not okay to just be dependent on one partner. So think about your existing partnerships. What if the main lead of some piece of it is gone? Can you guys jump in and take care of it? And so think of that and therefore outline every role. Investor relations, taxes, K1s, who's going to do that? It can be extremely intense and boring and painful for a short time, and then you're completely done, right? Or who's the one ongoing every week with the property management calls, the site visits, checking into the CapEx, the construction projects. I mean, it looks like, Jen and Sean's project has a ton of CapEx, right? I think they have several $1 million of CapEx to do. So that itself needs a breakdown. Like I have a partner who's a PhD in electrical engineering. I only have a master's. He has a PhD. So he's the one who talks about all the electrical systems and chillers and everything else. And he's the one who wants to work on that. But I'm the one who's going to work on, okay, what do we need to do for interiors? What's a budget? What is approved? What's a SKU number that's approved up to this amount? You can only spend only so much on an appliance. And why do you have to replace the entire flooring? There's just a little bit that's broken. So I need a photo. I need a video of that floor plan to justify this $10,000 interior, because I really think it should be 2,000, or it's not approved and I'll come by the property tomorrow and check on it. So you need to really spell out the 10 or 15 main tasks that need to get done for a deal before and after closing, and who is going to fulfill those roles, and thereby figure out your splits and whatever else.
I mean, just completely upfront and understand exactly what you're saying. Not easy conversations, for sure, but needed.
Rather have it during the good times or upfront before you get into a relationship than afterwards. Like, I don't want to have any kids. You want to have 5 kids. Okay, we're going to have a problem getting married, right?
Yeah.
It's like
there
that.
You go.
Have those conversations.
Very good conversation. All right. So tell us about ACE operators. Tell us about what you do, what you're looking for people, how you can help them.
So I help syndicators with the asset management piece that is generally not really explained in depth in most mentoring programs. It's sort of like you throw it over the wall. You think you can pay somebody and hire an asset manager and it's going to be fine, when instead you should be talking to that asset manager right from the beginning when you're underwriting a deal to see if you can even execute the plan with those numbers, right? It's not I'm done. I'm going to celebrate this closing and sail into the sunset, throw it over the wall to somebody and just hire somebody and say, here, you go do this work, right? That doesn't work. So we talk about asset management right from the beginning of when you underwrite or when you do a refinance, etc., the strategic and tactical steps. And what we do is we bring experts in, because obviously I haven't been through an entire building fire, but I brought in somebody who's been through that. And I don't know enough about the lending side the way you do. So I bring people like you as a guest to come and talk about the lending side. So we bring in expert speakers as needed, but the rest of the time we talk about the challenges everybody's going through, because you might have the same problem and you might have solved it 6 months ago. So I can just take your ideas. So it's really a mastermind rather than I'm the lead and you are the student kind of mentality. Although I have a lot of ideas just garnered from all my conversations with experts like you. We had JT in as a expert speaker for us once, just to dig into the details of little things about insurance to watch out when you're making a new deal acquisition, but also before your renewal comes up. What can you do in planning and how it all works? Why we don't go talk to 2 different insurance guys, because they're now going to the same companies, right? All of those little nuances. So we bring in experts. But the purpose, again, is to deep dive into your deal. So if you have a distressed deal, you want to share the financials confidently with me, and you black out all the property names and stuff, then we'll just take the financials and we'll deep dive into it in separate Zoom rooms or together as a team. And so you'll get 15 or 20 different inputs on how to solve that problem. So now you can take back and do it. And so we've had several people that we have those awards for who've increased their property values by over $1 million just from deploying those strategies. But like one example is this guy whose deal was negative cash flow, bridge loan, not meeting any of the lender's DSCR requirements, was really in danger of, going very south very quickly. And he turned it around because he focused on the biggest building blocks first. One of his partners actually flew in and stayed there for some time, and they implemented various strategies, and they increased their collections by 65%. And they're on cruising altitude now to refi out of a bridge loan, right? So his property value went up easily by over $1 million. And that's just one deal for one person we're talking about. So imagine if you have a portfolio. So my ideal ACE operator member would be somebody with a portfolio of at least, a couple of hundred doors, right? If you just have 20 doors and getting your first deal, it may not be a good fit. It's more of someone who's already done underwriting, has a couple of deals under their belt, wanting to improve their operational efficiencies, then they apply. So it's not, here, scan this QR code and here you go. It's you apply, we have a separate conversation. We want to make sure your energy fits the energy of the room. We don't want somebody to completely hijack the meetings. And then we make sure I can really help you. Because if I can't help you, it doesn't make sense to take your money. So at the beginning, I offered a policy where I would refund their money because I wasn't even sure how long I would do this. But as I saw the results, now it's like, yeah, I know this will work. And so we can discuss it in a one-on-one call and decide if this even makes sense. But that's aceoperators.com. And it's for multifamily only. It's not for other asset classes.
Okay. So aceoperators.com. If anybody's interested in taking a look at it, having a conversation, kind of figuring out, is this the right path for you? Because, this was only, 50 minutes. Sandhya has so many ideas to help you, to make you successful. She's seen it. She's lived it. And also the people in the room are so helpful as well. That can be an asset as well to you. Get a hold of her, look it up. Again, aceoperators.com. All right,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I put it in the chat box. And the other thing that I haven't said as benefits is people in that network, because we're such a small group, I've had 84 applications to date. I've taken 21 people, just to give you exact numbers, okay? So it's not like anyone can come in and just hang out with us. It's a good group, and I want to keep the energy of the group where it belongs. And partnerships have formed from that, right? And that's what's cool. There's already partnerships forming just from the little group meeting together on a regular basis and really being vulnerable. These sessions are recorded. We sign confidentiality agreements. No one's supposed to know outside of the group whose deal has a problem and what's going on until after it's resolved. They want to leave a testimonial, then we talk about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are all about relationships. This, as you can tell, everybody's trying to help everybody learn and help in any way they can. So wonderful. So much information here. So valuable. Is there anybody in the room that has a question before we move on? Alex, Paula, you're usually the people that have something to ask.
Paula was there the whole day for the summit. So she was front row taking pictures and asking away questions. And so we had a great time. And so this entire booklet, she wrote a lot on it.
There you go. This was fun. Oh, now you're disappeared. There you go.
You know me, Julie. I'll jump in with a question.
Sure.
Hey, Sandhya, what are some indications that you might need to fire your property management company?
The personality of the PM, if week after week they are telling you things and it's not actually happening, it depends on your timeline, right? Sometimes I've had partners who are very nice, and in their efforts of being nice, we are actually not doing the right thing by our investors or residents. I believe, just like in corporate, Sean, is you hire slow and you fire fast. The sooner, if you even have an inclination, an instinct is telling you this is not going to be the right fit, like especially the on-site PM, the personality, you've got to fire them. Like in Oasis, our on-site PM left without notice because they were pissed with the regional. They put somebody else in place. One visit, I was able to tell this is not going to be the right personality. I documented it. I told them within 30 days that person had to be let go. We got to get somebody else. I do not like to keep non-performers because it's like having that one rotten apple in the basket. It's going to make the entire basket bad very quickly. That's for your actual on-site personnel. Even your maintenance, if they have a bad attitude, that's a no-no. They need to be very customer service oriented. If they're rude to residents, they need to be out. There is no question of giving them a chance. But your PM company as a whole, that's a longer process for us, right? Because you need the lender's permission. So what I do in that case, when I know the PM has to be fired and I can't do it immediately, I start influencing my on-site to decide if I want to keep my on-site, but just put a different company in their place. Or if it's everybody's a complete purge, right? That's two different strategies. So that's how I would approach it. Is if I want to keep my on-site, I just make more frequent visits. There's more Chick-fil-A lunches. There's more of my strategy getting executed, while in parallel, the paperwork is in progress to get rid of that PM and keep the same on-site employee.
Strategic and tactical. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, amazing night. Thank you so much, Sandhya. Appreciate all of the information you've left here for us to kind of put it in our mouths and figure out how we can implement that on our future, current, or maybe what we've done in the past. So thank you so much. I so appreciate it. It's always great to have you here.